There's a truth we often avoid because it's uncomfortable. Life is hard. Not sometimes, not only for the unlucky, for everyone. At some point, you will be tested by loss, by disappointment, by injustice, by your own limitations. And when that moment comes, the temptation to complain will feel natural, even justified. You'll want to point fingers, to say this isn't fair, or why me? You'll want the world to acknowledge your pain, your effort, your frustration. But here's the problem. Complaining doesn't fix anything. It doesn't heal you. It doesn't move you forward. It doesn't change the nature of the difficulty. It just gives it more power. We've confused expression with progress. We believe that voicing our dissatisfaction somehow moves us closer to resolution, but in reality, it often traps us in the very cycle we're trying to escape. The more we complain, the more we train our minds to focus on what's broken rather than what can be built. The more we verbalize helplessness, the more helpless we feel, and the more we expect the world to change in response to our frustration, the more bitter we become when it doesn't. This isn't about suppressing pain. Pain is real. Struggle is real. But complaining is not how we conquer struggle. It's how we surrender to it. It's how we delay action, deny responsibility, and deflect growth. Every moment spent complaining is a moment not spent adapting, not planning, not building, and ultimately not living. You weren't put on this earth to coast through comfort. You were built for challenge, forged in resistance, shaped by the very difficulties you want to escape. Life is not going to apologize for being difficult. So stop asking it to. Don't complain about life. Confront it, command it, transform it, and in doing so, transform yourself. When you complain, you give away your power. You may not realize it because it often feels like the opposite. Complaining feels like control, like you're identifying the problem, like you're making your dissatisfaction known. But beneath that feeling is a dangerous psychological transaction. What you're really doing is offloading responsibility, placing it somewhere outside yourself, onto people, circumstances, or life itself. And once responsibility leaves your hands, so does the possibility for growth. Because you can't change what you don't own. You can't transform what you refuse to claim. This is a fundamental truth that's difficult for many to accept. The moment you shift your internal narrative from what can I do to why is this happening to me, you've stepped out of the driver's seat of your life. You've allowed your identity to be shaped by what's happening around you, not by what you choose to do about it. That mindset, over time, doesn't just make you passive. It makes you resentful, and resentment, psychologically speaking, is one of the most toxic emotional states a person can dwell in, because it feeds the illusion that you're powerless while simultaneously inflating your sense of righteousness. Now look, pain is real. Injustice is real. You don't need to pretend that everything is fine when it clearly isn't. But you need to be brutally honest about the difference between recognizing pain and rehearsing it. Recognition is awareness. Rehearsal is fixation. And complaining is a form of rehearsal. It's a repetitive loop of dissatisfaction that masquerades as processing, but never leads to resolution. Instead, it creates a psychological reward system around victimhood. It turns suffering into identity. The more you complain, the more you teach your mind that blame is easier than responsibility, that reaction is easier than action, and that comfort is preferable to change. This is where the distinction between comfort and courage becomes critical. Complaining is comfortable because it asks nothing of you. It's the release valve that keeps you from exploding, but also from evolving. It lets you feel momentarily justified while avoiding the deeper work of adaptation and resilience. Responsibility, on the other hand, demands that you confront your own limitations, your own role, your own response, and that's painful. But that pain is transformative. It doesn't trap you, it forges you. What we need to understand on a deeper philosophical level is that suffering in life is inevitable, but suffering without direction is a choice. Complaining is what we do when we experience pain without purpose. But if you're willing to take responsibility, not just for your circumstances, but for your response to them, you convert that pain into momentum. You begin to act even if the odds are against you. You begin to rebuild even when no one is helping. That's where personal power lives. not in the illusion of control, but in the reality of agency. Agency means you accept that you may not have created the storm, but you're still responsible for how you sail through it. And that is not weakness, it's sovereignty. When you assume that kind of control over your life, you stop waiting for fairness. You stop waiting for apologies. You stop expecting life to deliver you comfort, and instead you begin to train yourself for impact. You become someone who doesn't just survive hardship, but is refined by it. Now, this isn't an easy message. It's not comfortable, but it's necessary. Because as long as you're stuck in complaint, you're stuck in place. The weight of your words becomes the chains around your will. You can't climb if you're always narrating how heavy the mountain is. You climb when you decide that reaching the top matters more than describing how hard the path feels. So ask yourself this right now in this season of your life. Are your words building strength, or are they building walls? Are you rehearsing pain, or are you reshaping it? Because the words you speak, especially the ones you repeat, are programming your identity. And if you keep telling yourself and the world that life is unfair, that nothing works, that everything is too hard, then that's the story you're choosing to live inside. You can change the story. You can stop complaining and start building. You can start acting like the solution even when you're still surrounded by the problem. And that mindset, that shift, is how ordinary people become extraordinary. Not by avoiding struggle, but by refusing to let struggle define their voice. Here's the final thought I'll leave you with. Every time you complain, you trade potential for pity. And the world doesn't need more people seeking pity. It needs more people realizing their potential. Be one of them. There's something deeply deceptive about complaining. It convinces you that you're thinking clearly, when in fact, you're distorting the way you see everything around you. Complaining doesn't sharpen perception, it clouds it. It exaggerates problems, shrinks solutions, and magnifies powerlessness. The more you engage in it, the more it trains your mind to focus only on what's missing, what's wrong, what's unfair. Over time, that becomes your default lens. You stop seeing life as it is and start seeing it as one long, unjust burden. And here's the tragedy. Once you allow that distortion to take hold, it doesn't just change how you interpret the world, it changes what you're capable of within it. The human brain is designed to filter reality. It can't process every detail at once, so it highlights what you habitually focus on. If you constantly rehearse negativity, bitterness, injustice, your brain learns to filter for more of that. It's called confirmation bias. You'll walk through the world and unconsciously search for more things to justify your dissatisfaction. You'll overlook the good, the progress, the opportunities. Why? Because you've trained yourself not to see them. That's what complaining does. It teaches your mind that negativity is not just safe, but true. And once you believe it's true, your life starts reflecting that belief. But here's the flip side, and it's equally powerful. The opposite of complaint is not silence, it's gratitude. And I don't mean some cheap sentimental version of gratitude. I mean gratitude as a discipline, as a mental posture. Gratitude isn't about ignoring hardship, it's about refusing to let hardship become the only story you tell. Where complaint narrows your perception, gratitude expands it. It doesn't deny the darkness. It just reminds you that the darkness isn't all there is. Psychologically, gratitude reprograms your nervous system. It activates parts of the brain associated with empathy, resilience, and emotional regulation. It allows you to zoom out, to contextualize your suffering rather than drown in it. It gives you the mental space to ask what remains. What can I build on? What still matters? That clarity, born out of gratitude, is what makes progress possible. You cannot build anything meaningful if your view of the world is constantly obscured by everything you think it owes you. Complaining, in contrast, turns life into a courtroom. You become both plaintiff and judge, listing all the ways the universe has wronged you. But that mindset doesn't lead to justice, it leads to paralysis. Because even if your case is valid, even if life has been unfair, what then? Will proving the injustice somehow restore your sense of meaning? Or will it just deepen your attachment to the idea that you are forever disadvantaged? This is where philosophical depth matters. You have to step back and ask yourself, not just, is this fair, but is this useful? Because fair or not, if your current mindset is keeping you bitter, small, reactive, and blind, then it's not helping you evolve. And if you're not evolving, you're stagnating. Life is movement. It's direction. And you can't move forward if your vision is stuck on everything behind you that went wrong. This doesn't mean you need to force positivity. Toxic positivity is just another form of denial. What you need is perspective. And that comes from gratitude. Real gratitude is not a feeling, it's a form of awareness. It's the capacity to recognize that despite everything you've lost, you still have something to work with. You still have breath. You still have mind. You still have choice. And if you can acknowledge that, then you can begin to act again, not from desperation, but from clarity. So you need to ask yourself, what are you looking at? What are you constantly reinforcing with your thoughts and words? Because your mind is always listening. Every complaint you speak becomes part of the story you believe, and belief shapes behavior. If you believe the world is against you, you will act like it. You will stop reaching, stop building, stop trying. But if you believe there is still something good, something possible, even something small, you'll begin to act from strength. And strength, no matter how quietly it begins, always multiplies. Let this settle in. Complaining is not insight, it's inertia. It doesn't move you forward. It holds you in place, even as the world around you keeps changing. But gratitude is momentum. It is the decision to see clearly, to speak clearly, and to live clearly. So the question is simple. Are you reinforcing blindness or building clarity? Because your life will follow the direction of your focus. Train your eyes on what remains, and you'll find more than survival. You'll find purpose. There's a fundamental principle in life that too many people overlook. The world doesn't respond to noise, it responds to movement. And that's why complaining, no matter how loud or emotionally charged it may be, accomplishes almost nothing. Because complaints are static. They're all talk, no traction. They feel like action, but they're actually avoidance. And in a world that's already indifferent to your struggle, giving your energy to complain is like shouting into a void. Nothing changes except your own capacity to believe in yourself. This is where the harsh truth hits. The universe doesn't adapt to your frustration. It's not moved by how upset you are, how unfair your situation feels, or how eloquently you can describe your suffering. It only shifts when you shift. It yields to those who take action, not to those who narrate their despair. That's not cynical, it's empowering. Because it means you're not at the mercy of fate. It means you still have agency, even in adversity. But you can't access that agency by pointing fingers. You access it by deciding to move, imperfectly, painfully, but decisively. Think about the psychology of it. Complaining externalizes the problem. It creates a story in which you are acted upon rather than the one who acts. It slowly erodes your internal locus of control, that critical belief that you are responsible for the outcomes of your life. Once you give that up, you start waiting for others to change, waiting for your circumstances to improve, waiting for permission to try again. And that waiting becomes a prison. The door is open, but you never walk through it because you've trained yourself to believe that talking about the problem is enough. And that belief is seductive. Complaining gives you temporary relief. It creates the illusion of progress, the sensation of release, and maybe even social validation. People nod, they empathize, they agree that yes, things are hard, but when the conversation ends, what's actually changed? You're still in the same place, facing the same challenge with the same options. All that energy you spent describing the weight could have gone into lifting it. And the hard truth is, the longer you complain, the more comfortable you become with that dynamic, where expression replaces execution, and suffering becomes your identity rather than your motivation. What makes action so powerful isn't just that it leads to results, it's that it restores your relationship with yourself. When you act, even in small ways, you prove to your own psyche that you're not helpless, that you're not just a bystander in your own life. You start to rebuild trust with yourself, which is the foundation of real confidence. And confidence doesn't come from being handed easy conditions. It comes from knowing you can handle hard ones. There's also a deep philosophical element here. Human beings are not just thinkers, we are doers. We were not built to sit in analysis or self-pity. We were designed to move, to build, to strive. That's why apathy feels like death, because it is. It's the slow erosion of your potential. But the antidote isn't more insight, it's more courage. Not courage in grand, dramatic gestures, but courage in simple daily movement. The courage to get up, to try again, to work in silence, to build without applause. And building is what ultimately sets you apart. Because while most people are busy rehearsing their grievances, the ones who quietly put their heads down and move forward, those are the ones who shape the world. Not because they had it easier, not because they were lucky, but because they understood that results only come to those who move toward them. The gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't closed by complaint. It's closed by commitment. Now, none of this means you can't acknowledge pain. You should. But acknowledgement is not the same as indulgence. Acknowledge the pain and then use it. Use it as fuel, as a reason to rise, as evidence that something must change and that you're the one responsible for initiating that change. The action doesn't need to be huge. It just needs to be honest. Start where you are, with what you have, in the face of everything that says you shouldn't even try. Because in the end, no one remembers the person who described the problem the best. They remember the one who stood up and did something about it. Be that person, not for applause, not for validation, but because that's who you become when you stop waiting for life to cooperate and start cooperating with your own potential. So here's the thought I want to leave you with. You can talk about the wall or you can climb it. One will drain you, the other will define you. Choose accordingly. There's a kind of dignity in how you carry the weight life places on your shoulders, and most people never fully realize how profound that truth is. We tend to judge the worth of someone's life based on what they've achieved, how much they've earned, or how far they've risen. But very rarely do we ask the deeper, more essential question, how did they carry what couldn't be changed? Because that's where true character is revealed. Not in moments of success, but in how a person bears the load they didn't ask for. It's easy to carry something when it's light, when it's fair, when everyone is cheering you on. But what about when no one sees you? What about when the weight is invisible to others, but crushing to you? What about when the burden is loneliness or grief or failure that keeps repeating itself? In those moments, you have a choice. You can complain, fall into bitterness, blame the world, and slowly allow that weight to define you. Or you can carry it with strength, quietly, steadily, with discipline and integrity. And it's in that decision that the essence of who you are begins to take shape. Philosophically speaking, life doesn't offer fairness as a default. It offers responsibility. It offers struggle. And your relationship to that struggle defines your identity far more than your circumstances ever could. If you see every difficult moment as an attack, you'll live defensively. But if you see it as a test, one you didn't choose, but one you're capable of enduring, you'll rise through it. Not because the struggle is noble, but because your response to it is. Your struggle is a bonding experience grown. It's an opportunity, not because it isn't, but because your response to it is. Psychologically, we know that people who endure hardship with responsibility develop something deeper than surface level resilience. They develop what's called psychological hardiness, the ability to confront difficulty, to find meaning in it, and to adapt to it. And that adaptation doesn't come from complaining about the load. It comes from understanding that how you carry it shapes you, day by day, step by step. Not in grand gestures, but in small, repeated acts of discipline, self-restraint, and focus. In saying, this hurts, but I'm not going to let it make me cruel. This is unfair, but I'm still going to show up fully. That is what builds real strength. Not the kind that impresses others, but the kind that makes you indestructible from within. The kind of strength that stays quiet in public, but roars in private. When you pick yourself up one more time. When you refuse to let despair rewrite your identity. When you choose to love again, even after betrayal. When you keep showing up, even when no one thanks you for it. And the irony is, most people won't even notice when you do this. They won't see the internal battles, They'll see you functioning, maybe even succeeding, and assume you have it easy. But that's part of the challenge, to carry your load without needing applause, to find meaning in your own quiet endurance without making a performance of your pain. Because the more you rely on external validation, the weaker your internal foundation becomes. But the more you find strength in your own discipline, the more unshakable you become, regardless of how others perceive you. This doesn't mean you become emotionless or hardened. On the contrary, it means you learn to discipline your emotions rather than be dominated by them. You recognize the weight for what it is, but you don't let it turn you into someone bitter or broken. You carry it with grace. You turn pain into wisdom, and eventually your load doesn't just weigh you down, it builds you up. It shapes the architecture of your soul. You have to understand, there are people who carry less than you and collapse. There are others who carry more and still rise. It's not about comparison. It's about how you carry what you've been given. Do you carry it with resentment, or do you carry it with resolve? Because in the end, your life won't be remembered for how easy it was. It will be remembered for how you handled what wasn't. So don't waste time measuring the size of the burden. Measure the strength of your response. Because the weight you carry might not be fair, but the way you carry it, that's where your greatness is born. Here's the final truth. Life will test you. And the world may never see the battle you're fighting, but you will know. And that's enough. Carry it well. Carry it with honor. Carry it in a way that makes even the silence proud.